Okay.
Call the committee meeting to order. Ken can check the roll.
Golnitz?
Here.
Scotty?
Here.
Burley?
Here.
Brennan?
Here.
Hageman?
Here.
Jones?
Here.
McAlexander?
Here.
Okay, that's a quorum of 7.
Okay, for approval of the agenda for tonight, we need a motion.
So move.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And the meeting minutes from the last meeting, we need a motion to accept those.
Are we gonna talk about the comment sheet, what Ken was kind enough to do as well at this time with the minutes, or just the minutes?
It's just the minutes at this point.
All right,
Let's just get them approved.
move we approve the minutes.
Second.
The only change I would have, and Joe Haverty's name,
Is it spelled wrong?
yes,
Oh, apologies.
no problem.
We will fix that.
I'll make the correction.
Sure.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Public comments for things that are not on the agenda? No? All right. We have a presentation tonight. Dr. Summers, and are you plugged in, ready to go?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Um,
Yeah, she's something.
Okay.
You don't need to warn you, we do have an active investment banker in the committee here, so he's gonna be understanding every word that you say.
Okay, well, I know that. Anyways, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Gail Jensen Summers. I'm an economics professor. And my area, my specialty is not finance, it's more health economics and healthcare finance. But I just wanted to share an economist's perspective on using alternative approaches for financing. So what I'd like to do is set up an example and then examine a few different ways of financing that project. So I'd like to address 3 questions. Would bond financing affect the annual tax bill for a property with average taxable value in the village? And third, just to give you some comparison, we're going to compare this to a pay-as-you-go approach with a 3 mil increase. Okay. And we're going to make some assumptions for starters. First, that the committee has decided on an approach and that you've gotten competitive bids and a contractor's quoted price is 11.5 million for everything you want to do. And to just kind of give you some perspective, what I was thinking when I pulled that number out is a major renovation of Bristol Lane and all the little offsets of it, and then a surface rehab for everything else. And we're going to ignore Timber Trail for the minute, for tonight. I'm assuming that the village currently has 2.7 million already saved for road renovation, that under Act 51, the village receives about 150,000 a year for the roads, and that a bond issuer would likely charge 1.2 million just to set up our bonds. And that's based on what I have heard, the Village of Franklin paid to set up its bond program in 2017 and 2018. Now, I don't know if that's accurate. This is just secondhand information that I heard, but we're going to assume that tonight. I'm also going to assume that the coupon rate is 5% for a 10-year bond or even a 20-year bond. And I went on Fidelity Investments and I looked at what municipalities in Oakland County recently have issued 10-year bonds. And I found that Southfield, Livonia, and Ferndale all issued 10-year bonds in 2023. And all of them paid have a 5% coupon rate. Now, the coupon rate is the annual interest rate that the bond issuer or the municipality pays bondholders. So a 5% rate means that on a $10 million bond, for example, $500,000 is paid every year in interest alone. Okay, that's 5% of 10 million. We're also going to assume that the average taxable value of residential property is 261,215, and that each 1 mil increase would generate about 200,000 for the village per year. And we're going to ignore the fact that home values tend to rise, so revenue from a millage increase will rise a little bit every year. And we're going to ignore that if we're holding funds that we're saving for the future, we can put them in interest-bearing accounts. Now, we're going to run through an example, then I'll speak to what happens if we relax those assumptions. So how would 10-year bond financing work? Well, if we pay a bond issuer 1.2 million, that's going to reduce our village savings to 1.5 million because we have to pay that company. And so the village is now $10,000 or $10 million short of what the road contractors has quoted, 11.5 million. So that means that it would issue, if we pursue this bond approach, $10 million in municipal bonds. It would receive $10 million from bondholders and then pay the contractor 11.5 million to go forward with the roads. Now, and let me just mention, I'm going to be talking about a $10 million bond, but in reality, what happens is that $10 million is carved up into much smaller pieces so that many people can buy the bonds at typically $5,000. So we're really talking about 2,000 bonds at $5,000 a piece. So in this graph, each little blue bar represents $500,000 in interest. And this is what the bondholder would be receiving. $500,000 in every year. And then in year 10, we would pay back the $10 million. And $10 million is a staggering amount. And what municipalities typically do is they carve up this large figure into smaller amounts so that in every year they're collecting, they're saving money so that in year 10, they're gonna have the money that they have to give back to the bondholders. So if we were to save $1 million a year, what that implies is that in every year, we would have to collect $500,000 to pay for the interest and $1 million, another $1 million that we'd save towards paying the principal back in year 10. And let's take a more detailed look at this bond. And here I've also put in what would happen if we were looking at a 4% coupon rate or a 6%. We're going to focus on the middle row here. The annual interest expense is $500,000. The annual principal expense, $1 million. The total interest expense over the life of the bond is $5 million. And if we add that to the principal, that's 15 million. And we can then divide that by the length of the bond to get an annual cost of 1.5 million. Now, if we assume that each mill will generate 200,000, we just divide that number by 200,000 and get 7.5 mills. That's what it would take per year to pay back this a $10 million bond, a 10-year, $10 million bond at the current rate, which is 5%. Now, 5%, historically speaking, is actually high. We're in a situation here where rates increased over the last few years, and I don't know when they're going to come back down, but it looks like for 2024 at least, they're going to stay high. I mean, they'll come down when the Federal Reserve is able to lower inflation. So let's look at, just summarize what's here. How would if we have to raise the mills by 7.5, what does that translate into? Well, for the average property in this village, that means an increase of 1,959, about roughly $2,000 a year. For homes of higher value, it's more than that. And for homes of lesser value, it'd be smaller. And if we were to consider a 20-year bond, well, maybe that would help the situation. No, it actually makes it worse. Well, actually here in this particular page, on an annual basis, it does help. Okay, it would lower a 20-year bond at 5% would require 5 mills a year for 20 years. And that translates into 1,305 for the average residents in the village. Whereas if we were to use a pay-as-you-go approach, 3 mills translates to $784 for the average residence. So there's a big difference. And here we're looking at it graphically. In blue, I've got the 10-year bond. In orange, the 20-year bond. This is the height here measures the increase in taxes for the average residents. And in gray, we have a pay-as-you-go. A pay-as-you-go, it would take, I estimate it would take around 12 years to finance this project, and it would not, we wouldn't delay it until we have all the money, but we would do it according to what is our first priority, second, third, and fourth, for example. And let me just mention that if you want to get an idea of what the total cost to the taxpayers would be with different approaches, if you look at these blue bars, for example, and just imagine kind of smushing them all together, squeezing them so they all line up and touch each other. The area of that rectangle would be the total cost over the life of the bond. And likewise for the orange. And it turns out the area for that orange is a lot bigger if we push those bars together. And then, of course, for the gray, likewise, in the aggregate, that's going to work out to the lowest. So the 20-year bond, even though it's lowering the tax bill, the extra taxes paid per year, the fact that that tax increase is stretched out over 20 years results in an even larger expense. So the key observations here are, in my view, bonds will substantially raise the cost of doing this project. If it's $10 million that's needed, it's going to increase that cost by 50% for the village and turn it into a cost of 15 million. And a 20-year bond would literally double the price, double the cost of the project. Instead of paying 10 million, you will pay 20 million to renovate the roads. And a pay-as-you-go approach avoids all those extra expenses. Now, the cost, or one of the negatives of using a pay-as-you-go is things aren't going to get done as fast as they would with a bond approach. But in my opinion, a lot of our roads have a lot of life left in them. And I think, and they've already been paid for. So it's, economically speaking, it's in our interest to make good use of that extra life that's there. Don't rush into renovating roads that have a lot of good life left, and we've already paid for it. So, and the other thing to consider is that even with a bond approach, a contractor is unlikely to do everything right away. It's going to take time. Things have to be done when the seasons are right. And I estimate it's probably going to take 5 years to get everything done. Whereas with a pay-as-you-go, we're talking 12 years. So there's not that big a difference between 5 and 12, 7 years. Also, using bonds would require that property taxes rise by a lot more than they would rise with a 3 mil increase. And a few more observations. Typically condos have lower taxable value. So condo owners would pay less in terms of dollars. Even though everybody is paying the same millage rate, when you convert it into the actual tax bill, it's going to be lower. Yes.
Can I ask a question there? First of all, I commend you for doing this and taking the time and crunching the numbers, because this committee is going to have to do that sooner or later. And you've, I think, made a good start at it in terms of like with regards to the bond approach. What your comment about, you know, it would about the condos, all millages like that, right? I mean, like, it's not,
That's right. Yeah.
doesn't have to do with roads. And in this case, the roads that we're repaving aren't in the condos.
That's right.
So the fact that the condo people are spending less, they're spending less for benefits which they're not getting, right?
Well, they get some benefit, just
How?
not as much.
How? I've never been on Sager Court in my life, and with a car, and I've lived here for 7 years. How do I benefit by that?
Well, a
See,
lot of,
that's part of the problem we have, is that we're gonna have to get 51% of the votes. And
well, there are, I understand the logic of assessments for residences on public roads. Okay, I think that makes sense to have a differential payment. However, I didn't look at that in this analysis. I mean, I actually have looked at it sort of with a pencil and paper, and like how much could people absorb and so on. And I have opinions on that. But I think you've got to be careful and not impose too much on even the public road residents, because they, you know, a millage increase is hard enough to deal with, but per individual assessments is on top of that, it's,
That's
if
where
they
it
get
gets,
too
that's where it gets
large.
tricky, because then the
Yeah.
rest of the people will vote no too.
exactly,
Right.
totally agree with
Yeah,
you.
so you don't have a chance.
Totally agree with you.
Yeah.
You gotta find something that comes up with 51% of the votes both ways,
Right.
right?
And it's
I mean,
it's not our job.
I was just my gut was telling me, you know, maybe you take 2 million of this expense and have the public road residents absorb that without too much of an argument. But if you start getting above 2 million and you divide that by what, like 225, you can come out with an average per resident, because we've got about half the properties on public roads. The number just starts getting big fast, and that's,
When you were doing your research on the municipalities that took out bonds like Franklin,
Yeah.
what was the incentive that they had to take out a bond?
okay, let me get into that. Because I've thought about that. Let's imagine that Franklin would need to take out this exact same bond for 10 years at 5% interest. Well, I've calculated how it affects residents here.
3,000, we have 1,000.
Franklin, okay, for the very same bond in Franklin, it would only take an increase of 1.8 mils. And the reason for that is that instead of every, like here, a 1 mil increase generates 200,000, they've got 3 times the properties, so it generates 600,000. In addition, average taxable value is like 40% higher in Franklin. So you work up the numbers. They're home on my desk, but I did, it does come out to the 1.8 mils. And so that's why it would be more affordable. And when they actually did their bond, they probably were paying close between 2 and 3%.
The interest rate was lower.
Yeah. So it's easy to see how, what hurts Bingham Farms is we are small. I mean, we are just so small in the metro area compared to other municipalities. So it's really hard to raise raise revenue, and it's hard to keep the millage increase down.
Can I ask one other question? I know where you got most of your assumptions from. Where did you get the assumption on $11.5 million from? Was that
Well, I looked at the HRC numbers, and I assumed that Bristol Lane and its offshoots would require full renovation.
right?
And then on the others, I assumed it would be a minor renovation.
Okay, just asking because the latest numbers that HRC gave us was just under 9 million for selective rehabilitation and just under 15 million for long-term rehabilitation. So actually the numbers might be less than the
Okay,
numbers
it
that
might
you
be
were
less.
working
Now-
with. But I appreciate the time and effort you put
Well,
into
let me
doing
just
this.
say that even if we were to account for the village and with a 10-year bond, putting all the money that it collects towards the principal, putting that money into interest-bearing accounts. And if we optimistically assume we could earn 5% every year, then that would, instead of saving $1 million every year, that would pull it down to 840,000 that we would need every year. And then it ultimately translates into a millage increase of 6.4 instead of 7.5. And in terms of actual tax dollars, it would affect the average property owner by 1,672. So there is some savings there. But of all the assumptions we made, that's probably the one you would want to first check on. But I also want to say that even if, as Kurt said, this 11.5 is probably too high, these calculations, you could look at the tables I put together and scale down. Let's say we were ultimately looking at like 7 or 8 million that we wanted to borrow. You could actually calculate using, just add construct a similar type of little table as to what's in the memo. And you could calculate how it would affect the cost of the project. It's still going to be substantial.
You know, what you haven't put into this too is the cost of inflation over the
Right.
years.
Right, there's
So
no,
this is just a
there's no
scenario that
inflation.
says, this is the numbers we have right now, therefore everything is calculated on that number.
Right. Yeah, but you know, it's just whenever you are trying to work through an example, my job, what I tend to do is just keep it simple. So they'll understand the core concepts. But I just want you as a committee to have an understanding of how bonds affects the bottom line and what it means for the taxpayers. And especially with the data that was in the fall newsletter, you know, it's easy to calculate some of these things.
This was very useful to me. Thank you so much. This clarified a lot of things in my mind.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm here. I wanted to be on this committee, but I was not selected. But you know, I care about the village. I want to see the village make the right choice. And I think this committee is so central to what the council ultimately chooses. And my hope is that if you can come up with some different options, you can also look at how each of them would be financed and what it would mean for taxpayers.
Dale, I had just a couple of questions.
Sure.
First of all, I'm glad to hear that you're, and everyone, and I don't live in the village and I still care about the village. But thanks for putting all this together. And I haven't had a real opportunity to crawl through it, but I just had a couple questions. One, you were talking about using the bonds required for residential property and versus pay as you go. one of the other things I just wanted to point out is if we do that, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but what we have to, and you made certain assumptions because you had to in order to get to the numbers. But if we do it on an pay-as-you-go portion, two things, and Dee, you alluded to one, interest costs from what HRC, or costs rather, of materials, labor, things go up approximately 4% per year. So by doing it on an pay-as-you-go basis, the cost as we continue to keep doing the roads out in the future are gonna go up versus go down. And as we also do that, we have to keep in mind that the existing roads that aren't being treated are going to, a lot of factors, right? If we have a bad winter or a lot of contraction and expansion, there's gonna be more deterioration of those roads. So one of my thoughts are, okay, we had phaser ratings. If the road is a 3 and we have a couple of bad years of winter and thaw, right? It can go very easily from a 3 to a 1, where even if you're trying to maintain it, now you can't just do a middle restructure. You've got to completely dig it up and do the entire thing, which adds cost to it.
Can I interject there?
Yeah,
That is
sure.
not what the engineer said.
Okay,
The engineer said that you could maintain your Paisley ratings if you spend $150,000 a year in maintenance costs and preventative maintenance.
Yeah, that's
So
what I heard.
that
last
is
time.
right in the presentation.
Yeah.
And we all looked at it and we said, okay, so we could stay just static right today if we spent $150,000 a year. And
I
maintain our
don't think it'll
Paisley
stay static
ratings.
forever, but it'll extend the life.
Well,
significantly.
you know,
Yeah,
this
because
is
there
what
are-
the state's algorithm says.
So we have
So
some
maybe
control
it's
over that
150
aspect.
plus or minus 50, 100,000 or
Yeah.
something, but it's not millions.
okay,
So-
but it's still gonna be somewhat of a degradation.
If I could make a comment, again,
Yeah.
thank you, Gal, that was beautiful. But I think it's almost, you've almost put this into what I imagine our task is to present 3 to 5 recommendations to the village. Yet, even as you're doing this, there's 25 iterations people are already asking about, inflation,
Yeah,
the condo owners, blah, blah, blah. So I guess as we go into the rest of the meeting, my thought is, we don't have a lot of meetings left. And you've probably spent many hours putting this together. I took some of the information that Ken had passed around and that Kurt had passed around, did my own analysis of a pay to go. I spent several hours on it. I'm gonna spend several hours more on it to put it into a way that I think it could be presented to the council,
Mhm.
just for my own education. My encouragement is, I don't think we're going to achieve our target by meeting every 2 weeks for an hour and a half. We're gonna have to think of a way for me or Kurt or DE or Bill or whoever to do exactly what Gail's done. Once we identify that 3 to 5 projects we want to work on. This is gonna take time, and we need to get to that point so we can have those questions about inflation, about $150,000.
right, and everyone
think-
has
I
to
don't think
work
we
with
can
the
do-
same set of assumptions
Yeah.
regarding those.
Right, so
Yeah.
this is, and I guess as I said last time, the urgency seems to be that we have to have it by a certain time if we want to put it on a ballot, or if we have to put it on a ballot. That still to me is up in the air as well. If the proposal that's accepted in the end doesn't have to go on a ballot, we may have more time to flush it out. But if it's got to go on a ballot, we don't have much time. Anyway, thank you, because I know you've got hours put into this,
Well,
and it's
well, I
somebody.
did just retire.
Thank you.
This is quite different than running over to the classroom every day, so.
Are we gonna have your slides for the minutes? Is that,
I have the
Yes,
presentation.
you got, okay.
yes, and here's let me pass, well, I do have, because I edited what I sent you.
Oh, you did? We
So
just send
I-
it again and we'll,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
resend it, we'll get it in.
okay. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
Oh,
for
thank
this.
you. That's
Absolutely.
terrific.
Bill, were you done? Did you-
Yeah, and I actually just had one,
Oh, yeah.
no, I'm looking at on the third slide.
Yeah.
And you referenced that, you said what the 1.2 million to set up to issue the bond for the bond financing is what you heard
That's what I
that
heard.
cost. So I'm gonna look into that because it
Yeah.
seems like
That's pretty high.
that's pretty high, yeah.
Yeah, it sure sounded high to me too.
Right. And the last other thing I'm gonna look into is on the fourth slide, just paying the bond, you know, you have 2.7, and then we take out, we have 1.5 million. I don't know if, I'm checking with some bond folks and trying to learn and get more educated on it, but I think the cost of setting up the bond from the bond council and in any type of financial advisors of bonds gets put into the bond, and then you pay it out on a monthly basis. It's not something where, say, the cost of the bond was really 1.2 million, you have to write a check for
Well,
1.2.
that's-
But
yeah.
I'll check, but thank you for letting me know where you got the 1.2 from.
Yeah, that was with regard to the village of Franklin.
Right, because I know they did theirs in 2017 is what their issue was.
And I wouldn't be surprised if the fee has one fee to set it up, because there's literally a contract that's created. And then a separate fee that goes on for 10 years to actually do all the processing and pay bondholders and so on. So that could be referring to the total fee.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
right.
I think maybe one of the things we should then consider, do we want to pursue that entity, i.e. going for a bond? As what Eric had said, if that is really not something we want to present, now we can really explore what else we can do.
It's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Maybe you
And
take
that-
what you put on the table or take off the table.
That's true.
In other words, what do we want to accomplish in the next 3 or 4 or 5 years? What do we want to accomplish after that? So, and HRC has rightfully put kind of priorities to certain roads. Well, we go along with those priorities. As long as we keep up maintenance, we can keep that 3, 4, 5 phaser rating going for a lot longer until that road needs more work. And then hopefully we have then more money.
Yeah, we might not have a deadline like we think we're gonna have.
I
mean,
think
we might
that's
be-
right.
Yeah,
As much I hate this, well, I don't hate to say it, but this committee could be a long-term committee
or a long-term project.
or a long-term.
Yes.
Well, I think we do have a deadline though, in terms of when the council expects us to get back to.
Yes.
And I think that they're expecting, between 3 to 5 alternatives. Now, some of those alternatives may require a vote, some of them may not require a vote, but I'm just one council member. I'm not gonna vote for something, even if it's a pay-as-you-go 3 mil increase. I'm not gonna vote for that in a council meeting and vote to increase everybody's taxes by 3 mils. I would want that to go on the ballot. So that the people would have a chance to say, so I think that we really need to stick to at least having some proposals ready to go to the committee, and it's in the meeting when they ask us to have the proposals by.
I think every meeting that we have, with every presentation that's given, we get more information, it's building up,
Right.
it's multiplying. I've got a couple presentations planned for the next meeting that are huge. And it's just gonna add to the knowledge base. I trying to think, okay, what do we know right now? Are we gonna make it? Let's just wait until all the information comes in, okay? And you're up next.
All right.
If I may, just to expand upon what Kurt was saying, that if we do go, and one of the alternatives would be either a bond or, as you said, a millage increase that we might want to ask for or suggest. Maybe we need an alternative plan at that point if it doesn't pass. So plan B, plan C,
Then we're in a pay as you go, we automatically get
Automatically.
shut down, so.
but at that
Well,
point,
I don't, maybe, but if the pay-as-you-go requires a 3 mil increase, which it would,
Well, I think
or
we
some
can,
kind of increase.
we can do that without going out to the voters. I think that, we just gotta.
well, at that point, it's still increasing, it's still up to the village council to vote and make that pass.
Well, I think you have a base plan, which is $150,000 a year, right? That's like if this
Plus the
Committee doesn't do
2.7 million
anything.
that we had saved, that's.
Plus the
earmarked.
2.7, so
Right,
let's
right.
say, the base
Oh, I
plan
hate
is
that word earmarked, I'm
150,000.
sorry, using it.
And then you've got it was 1.6 because Bill didn't want to spend $1 million, I think, until he finished all the books or something, right, Bill?
I don't wanna spend anything. My job is to,
Well, the last 2 weeks ago, you said 1.6 million.
Well, I think one was set for one particular road and we could only take half of that if we wanted to move it somewhere else.
right, between the major and local, those road funds.
Yep.
You can't take more than 50% is my understanding, and transfer it from major to local or from local to major.
Okay.
And then the 2.7 was based upon me having a level of, I have to have a certain amount within the operating fund to pay the bills on a daily basis, at least 6 months within reserve. Of cash flow.
Bill, that's a good attitude to have. I like that.
Yeah, out of that, Bill, in my recollection, I looked at it was 1.6 million that you could commit to improving roads and still have that reserve,
Yes.
right?
I thought it was 2.7.
It's 2.7, but he
Total.
needs enough in reserve to pay bills through 6 months, so he wanted to keep a certain amount in reserve, so 1.6 was, said you could spend on roads.
No, it's the other way around. He's got 1.6 in the reserves
Yeah.
after it's 2.7 for the roads.
Is that right? That's not
Well,
right.
the 2.7 is in our savings account, our road savings account, right?
Yeah.
It-
So
when we-
eventually,
when we
let's say you
look at
could
it.
get 2.7,
I think
So
2.7 is the
2.7.
combined of the road.
so
and
you
general
have a
fund
plan
lines.
for 2.7
Right.
plus $150,000 a year, that's the base plan. And whatever else can be scraped up, that's without a millage increase, unless there's some philanthropic entity that
That's right.
is going to
You never know.
contribute.
You never know.
That's right,
We can all kick in $2 each.
that's right, there's a few businesses.
There you go.
Okay, so you clear on that?
So that's the gotta be the base plan, that's the no mill plan, no millage plan, right?
That or do nothing at all, but then it gets worse faster.
Yes,
it does.
I think there's an incentive to do something, right? So the incentive would be, okay, this is what the base plan could be, and then you build on top of that with potential millage or
Yeah, that's,
philanthropic.
I think that's right. yeah.
So I think, yeah, what she said and what you said about time sensitive and some of the other things are just sort of a lead in towards what I was trying to do, and that's to focus on, what are the options gonna be? And I'm not gonna read this, I'm assuming everybody has had a chance to read it already, and I don't like reading things that people have already read, but these are my suggestions. It's not intended to be like exclusive. If other people have better ideas, I think, they should raise them, because believe it or not, I'm not always right. And so this was just sort of like a starting point to like get us started in thinking about options. Option one is sort of the do nothing, like if we just go the way we've been doing it, what would that mean in terms of like 5 years from now? How much would the amount be versus how much would we have in savings in 5 years? And we've already had information like, it's gonna go up 4% a year. We know that the village has been trying to save $150,000 a year. So I think we could come up with like a chart that almost like the chart that Bill did for us with regards to the Act 51 funds, that shows like revenue in this fiscal year, or cost in this fiscal year, then the next fiscal year, so on and so forth, out for 5 years, and then the expenses, how much it would cost for each of the 5 years, and so on and so forth. The second option was that I came up was James, basically your option, just keep.
Well, can we just
Sure, go
go back to option one? So option one, as a road advisory committee, is that something we really want to explore and do nothing?
The only reason I put that in there is that, and you don't have to do anything. I mean, I don't, I'm not one person, but you
I'm
have
just
to.
asking the committee, is that something we want to entertain?
The reason that I put it in there is twofold, because I've had conversations with a couple of residents who's told me that they don't think the roads are that bad. that they don't think that there's a need to do anything right now. And while I might disagree with that opinion, the fact of the matter is, if we don't do anything for 5 years, I mean, I think the cost issue is gonna be worse than it is now. That's sort of the reason I put option 1 in there. Is like, if we don't do anything, what is this, whoever's on this committee 5 years from now, what are they gonna be faced with? And it's gonna have a lot of the same kind of assumptions in it that our presenter today had, which, you know, may or may not be accurate, but it's our best guess. So that's the reason it's in there. If you guys don't wanna consider that, then that's.
Well, you don't really mean do nothing. We've got an annual preventive maintenance program that, you know, fill potholes and things like that. We're actually doing stuff every year.
We're filling potholes, we're taking the snow off, you know, that sort of stuff. But we had one time when we did what you would call repair work, if Ken, if I'm correct in that, over the last 4 or 5 years.
So, just so that everyone's aware, some of our Act 51 dollars every year are spent on road, snow removal, I was gonna say road removal. So, snow removal, salting, culvert replacement, sometimes having to jet them out, filling potholes, cleaning stuff off the sides of the roads, sometimes when, believe it or not, there is dumping, from time to time, people dump crap on the side of the road, we gotta pay someone to clear it off. All that comes out of the Act 51 dollars, and that's when the graph that Kurt was just referring to. So we can't just rely on that, and the money from the Act 51, it's about $150,000 this year. That formula changes, tends to go up every year a little bit, but it doesn't always go up.
Now, do we also contribute another 150
Yes.
to that?
Beyond,
So essentially
beyond
we
the
have
Act
$300.
51 dollars, that's
Okay.
correct, yes. So in option 1, when in the third, fourth, fifth line down, it says council will continue to save $150,000 a year. That's the additional dollars. That's not the Act 51 dollars that you're referring to.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
all right.
So it's not really doing nothing. There's stuff going on, but it's not major.
Right. It's not, I don't think, enough to keep the roads in the condition that they're in now. Let me put it that way.
Maybe
Option,
we call this continue the status quo.
all right,
Or road
right,
maintenance, yeah.
status quo.
Well,
That's probably a
If
better,
it's 150,000, it should be, this is the recommended maintenance cost that the state of Michigan says we should do, right?
well, that's option 2 in my chart, is,
So option 1 is don't put aside the 150,000. Just use the state money.
option 1 is saving the $150,000 and adding it to the amount that's available to fix the roads in future years. Does that make sense? In other words, the last 3 or 4 years, we've been saving $150,000.
That's option 1. In addition to saving that, it would be, we're spending the Act 51 dollars on the basic
Like
maintenance.
this
Yeah.
past year, it's 147,000 dollars.
Yeah,
So
that's
I think
correct.
what you're objecting to is the do nothing, but it's really road maintenance plus.
It's not, never clean anything.
Yeah, I don't
Right.
think it's doing what the state of Michigan,
Probably not.
it's not doing the recommended level of maintenance.
Right, I agree. Option 1 should be called status quo. Not do nothing.
Not do nothing.
Change it.
And I think we
Alright.
should address it, because there will be residents who say, why do we have to do anything? I think it should be on the list.
So option 2, in my view, is, I'll call it the Burley plan, which is doing what the consultant said in terms of taking $150,000 a year and using it to maintain the roads. But it doesn't call for anything else. Okay, so, you know, in that plan, the roads would not be deteriorating as quickly as they did now. I actually asked the HRC guy, does that mean that they'd never deteriorate? And he said, no, but they would last considerably longer, you know, so I mean, like,
I think if you ask that guy the same question 3 times, you're gonna get 3 slightly different
I
answers.
think you might be right. I think you might be
But-
right.
He said, the state of Michigan said, based on the length of the roads that we have to maintain the Paisley ratings that they rated us at, it would be $150,000 a year. Now, maybe it's 175,000 or 125,000 or whatever. But there's some amount of money that will maintain your Paisley rating, right? Right, he's recommending 150,000 based on a state algorithm.
Yeah.
So it's gotta be around there somewhere.
Right, so that to me is like an option 2. Okay,
But again, it doesn't maintain your Paisley rating in perpetuity.
right,
Just buys time.
Yeah. it buys
Well,
time.
his graph was like this over time.
But the graph said it flattened out.
It's not, maybe, I mean, common sense would say that they're not gonna last forever.
No, but, you know, just when you say $150,000 a year, it's more than just filling cracks. Sometimes it's a little bit of resurfacing. You know, maybe it's chip seal or slurry seal one year or something. So that's the kind of maintenance that they're talking about doing $150,000 a year. Now, whether it really is $150,000 or something around there, it's just maintaining your Paisley rating.
So
And
really,
perpetuity.
yeah,
No,
so
I
really,
don't-
we're
I don't
looking
think
at,
that's what they mean. I don't think it's, I'm not, there's no reason to argue about it here, really.
That's what
Because-
I
but it's
understood
not-
when I
but
asked him this question.
It just, it'll extend the line, but not forever.
Let me do this. Let me review that. We all have the presentation, right? I sent that out to you. Let me look at that. But I'll call Brad and let me just get clarification on exactly what he's referring to.
Yeah, that's
I
gonna be
tend to
important.
agree with what you just said, Eric. It's not, you can't spend $150,000 and expect, without due respect, I don't think that's just gonna stretch it out for the next 20 years.
but it will keep. It would, yeah, 2 things on this. Number one, it looks to me like number 1 and number 2 are really the same thing. Or 2 is in addition to number 1, because if I understood right, if number 1 is just the Act 51 money. And number 2 is Act 51 money plus another 150. Is that kind of how you're looking at it?
I'm looking at the difference to me between number 1 and number 2, the way I had them thought in my mind, which is not like written in stone or anything, but in my mind, the difference is that in number 1, where we were saving $150,000 and adding to the amount that we had to do a big fix of the road, and number 2, we're spending that $150,000 each year to keep the roads as on a level basis as you can. In other words, $150,000 is getting spent to keep the roads where they're at, as opposed to being saved to do a major rework of the roads. That to me was the difference between 1 and 2.
If you add the 2 together, now we got 300,000 for the roads per year.
No, I was not adding in my option 2, we would not be adding another 150,000. We would just be spending the 150,000 we normally save to keep the roads in their current condition. Does that make sense?
No, so that with the Act 51 would give you 3. Wouldn't it?
Beg your pardon?
Okay, but the Act 51 gives 150 plus we're saving 150.
So they're averaging about $70,000 a year on Act money. So that's just, they're spending that. Some of it's being saved.
Yeah,
Right, Bill?
Not the
Yeah.
full amount, that's Bill, but yes, you're
Yeah.
right. Yes, not the full amount.
Yeah, so if
if
you
we
look
don't
at,
have to spend it, we don't have to spend it, but in other words, for crack seal and chip seal or whatever simple maintenance, that then carries,
Yeah, so there's
The roads.
probably another, $60,000 to $70,000 a year out of that money that could go to that 150,000.
And we could save it and accumulate the time, right?
As we're
That's
doing
what you
right
wanna
now,
do.
but
That's status quo. That would be status quo.
Yeah.
That's the first proposal, what you call status quo.
Okay.
Then the third proposal was basically, which roads are in the worst shape. And it's the Bristol Road and the adjoining roads. Those are the ones that are gonna be the most costly. And we would have to figure out, I don't think there's enough money to do those roads without some sort of additional revenues, and we would have to figure out what those revenues are. And I put down, doing the three little ones, Bristol Court, Brittner Court and Sager Court in the summer of 2025, and Bristol Lane in the summer of 2026. We'd have to try to figure out well, how much do we need to just do that portion of it? And can we have it by 2025 and 2026? And how is it gonna be raised? That would be like a third option. A fourth option would be a plan to redo all of the roads. Which would require more financing and which would undoubtedly take longer. And option 5 I put in here, and I think it's mainly because I know at least one committee member has expressed an interest in trying to come up with a scenario that doesn't have us in this position again, 5 or 10 years from now, because the first 4 options are just to get us through this, but option 5 is how do we come up with a financing option that not only gets us through this rebuild of the roads, but also sets us up so that 15 years from now, there isn't another committee looking at a $6 million shortfall. And that's gonna be a lot more money. So those were the 5 that I came up with. I'm not wedded to any of this, but those are, at least from where I standpoint, is sort of the options that we ought to be sort of narrowing in on. And there's, as you said, there's a lot of work to be done to get these 5 options to the point where you can present them to council or anybody else.
Sure. So your 5 things are concepts. They're not hard and fast spreadsheet lines or anything.
No, not yet. But I mean, I think it's at the point now where we have to start trying to do that. We have to start trying to make them hard and fast, more, pencil to the paper, figuring out exactly what the numbers are gonna look like.
Well, that's actually going on between 2 presenters for the next meeting. They have
great.
extensive calculations for future.
So could you shed some light on who's doing what?
Well, Kathy's got a spreadsheet proposal. There's some things on a spreadsheet that aren't really well defined, and I figure she's gonna handle that in a presentation. And then we've got a huge presentation from Jim on, well, you can tell them.
I just, accumulated all the information that the engineer said, what Bill has told us. And based on, my knowledge of running large projects and what is the best return on investment, I came up with a proposal.
So stay tuned.
So,
If anybody else has want to do the same thing, put a scenario together, would it be good to have 3 options?
But so, because it's a little mysterious here. So.
I was ready to present tonight, but I was not.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, it's not mysterious, it's done.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, but in the end, because
But
maybe I'll,
Ken's gonna send it out.
because maybe I'll say I'll do one of the options as well, but are you actually coming in to say, I've done these options and this is what I think might be best, this would be the proposal? Which is fine, I just kind of trying to think along with you.
You'll be able to read the entire thing from both these proposers
Okay,
within a few days.
okay.
And you can
Okay,
just
perfect.
digest it for a week and a half.
So I basically went over the engineering study. I assessed what I thought was appropriate and not appropriate in the engineering study. I made a reconciliation based on what I think is a good return on investment. I put together a schedule of what roads we would do when and how it would be funded.
So, but it's a lot of information. We want you to look at it, digest it, and, by the time we have the meeting and the presentations, you'll have some pretty good questions.
Jim, would you say that would be one complete option? Or
Yeah,
more
it's
than,
an
or more
option.
than one?
No, that would be one
Just one, okay.
option. You could take it.
Okay.
But I wanted to have at least an option where we assessed what, when the engineers came here, they said, it's really up to you as village residents what you want.
Mhm.
And that's why I asked you the question, what is our goal? Is our goal to have 9 and 10 Pazer roads, to have 6 or 7 Pazer roads? And so, you know, I kind of created my own, what is the objective? And then how would we fulfill that objective? And it doesn't include spending the whole $9 million.
But that would be a good question for these two guys to take to council. Let the council tell us, do we need all 9s, 6s, what, you know,
What are we going for?
yeah, exactly.
I mean, that part needs to be fixed, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, as I understood it, the mission of this committee was to figure out funding. Right, how are we gonna pay? What are, you know, as I recall, it was established 3 to 5 financing
Right.
options, right? It wasn't to determine engineering, what roads or.
Well, if I can interject, we did have that in the first meeting, and it was to actually, they opened the door to assess the engineering as well, in that
Mhm.
opening meeting,
Well,
so.
all I'm trying to say is that what you're providing is insight to help us get there to fix that assumption. But to be able to say, are you solving financing for 5 million or 8 million or 2 million?
Yeah.
You need to know what you're doing, right?
That's reasonable.
Yeah, I took an assumption of what I think would be a proposal, to Ken's point, for what our goal would be. For, you know, what would we hit for, you know, the Pazer ratings and then how much that
Council,
would
yeah,
cost.
council has instructed us to come up with 3 to 5. And I kind of look at it, 3 to 5 what? That's up to us. Do we want, again, to kind of go over what Kurt has done here, do nothing, do everything, or something in between. And I think, and if I gather what we're saying here is we're also coming up with a timeline, which I think is very important, is if we want to spend this kind of money, what is our timeline in spending that money? So that we could do a quote unquote pay as you go, or we go for a millage increase, or we do both, or we go for a bond. And I think in those 3 to 5 proposals, maybe it might be more, I don't know. We kind of assess all that. And I like the idea of doing that, but also have a proposal in there that says, if everything goes to stink, the village says, nope, we're not gonna give you any more money, what are we gonna do? Because we do know,
Which I
yeah,
think is proposal 1 that Kurt gave us.
See, it's 1 or 2, really.
But we still need to have council's guidance on what do we want in the end. We want 3s, we want 6s, we want 9s.
oh, I see, okay. Again, I think that's.
What
up to us.
quality of road do you want?
Yeah,
What quality of road, if the
And once-
quality is okay today, then you just stay where you're at.
once we get that guidance and feedback, then we can start filling in the number.
What do you think about that, Kurt?
I don't think council's ever,
Even looked at, thought about
has
it.
ever like thought about like, do we want 6s or 10s? You know, I mean, I don't recall that they've ever said like,
Right.
we want 6s
No,
or we
it's
I don't
want
even
10s.
think
Never
even,
been
it's
discussed.
never even
Never been
been passed.
Never
Because
been,
until we got to here, did we even think about that? Yes, we saw the presentation, okay, these roads are 2, these are 3, these are a 5 and 6, this is this. And I kind of looked at it, that, okay, that's something that we look at. And say, hey, council, we're an advisory council, we're an advisory committee. Council, this is what, these are the 3 to 5, we think you should think about each one of them.
So I have one,
So if we have one that says leave the
3
phaser what they are,
proposals.
or if one that says, okay, let's bring everything up to this, that's, yeah, that's what they're looking for.
I don't think the council has ever said, like, we want all the roads to be 10s
At one time.
At one time.
at
Right.
one time.
Yeah, that's just not,
Or even like ever, to be honest with you.
no, I
don't think
mean, if you could, there's no way you could have every road in the village at a 10.
Right.
Is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Okay,
could
so,
for like 2 months.
right, yeah, very short amount of time.
Until winter,
Yeah.
yes.
So I think what's important then is if a road is reconstructed, let's assume it's at a 10. I mean, if it's a brand new road, it would be naturally be the best road you could have, right?
Right.
But if this is a 5-year plan or
Right.
6-year plan, then that first road that's done is, I hate to use the word degrade after
But
only
it
5
has,
years,
it
but
has,
it would be, yeah.
Starts on the.
Right, and I would, but you know, it's gonna be, a new road is gonna have a slow
Mhm.
degradation, right? But then when you start, once that occurs, that's when you start looking at your $150,000 maintenance to maintain that 9 or 10 as long as you possibly can.
Yeah, and
I
the
think that's
enemy-
what, the way it has to
The
work.
enemy of the roads is water.
Yeah.
And the ice freeze thaw cycle.
Yep.
That's
So
what the-
it's what the engineer viewed the whole presentation. It was like, it's all about water intrusion
Mhm.
and whatever you can do to prevent that. So the first crack you get,
Take care of it.
you gotta take care of it. If you don't, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
True. So can you guys bring this up at the council and say this is something with direction that we need, or we can't fill in numbers based on
I don't,
fantasy?
just, I'm not on the council, so these guys can answer. I think by default, if we make the proposals, you will have the Pacer ratings. If we do nothing except maintain them, you're gonna have the Pacer ratings that you got today. On the other extreme, if you take out a bond and do everything in a couple of years, you're gonna have it at 10. So I would not want to work, if I was on this committee, towards a goal that is specific. Because then it's gonna drive the action.
That's a goal we could present or
Sure.
work with.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because one is gonna determine that Pacer rating. Whatever scenario you choose is likely gonna determine that. As opposed to they say, well, I want a 10 Pacer rating. Okay. Then we're all sitting here going, well, how are we gonna take out a bond and get it done as fast as we
Show me the
can?
money. Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right, I'm confident that the council's not gonna like say that they want all the roads to be.
6.5, yeah.
You know, they're not gonna want, they're not expecting all the roads to be a 10. They're just, I mean, they're really like,
yeah, I mean, as a council, we're in a quandary. What
right,
are we gonna do here, guys? We know that something has to be done.
What is
Give us some, yeah, and that's what council is asking. What is it?
So give us a target and we'll fill in the numbers.
Well, at every meeting now, we're having a roads committee update from you fellas, so let's make sure that question is
We can
posed.
bring it up, absolutely.
Bill,
Mhm.
just one quick question. I might as well throw a curveball in here. Mason, you last time presented some other financing alternatives that weren't the traditional. Is that something that this council or this board wants to still investigate? Because if, everyone's kind of dismissing Timber Trail right now. And if, is it possible for us? Is it a good option to try and get the grant that was discussed 2 weeks ago? And then see if that's even a potential. The problem that we've got is that our taxable values on our homes are so high that it's tough for us to compete on some of these loans. But if they're available and we can get it, then I think we should look at
But
it.
do you remember back when I was on the council and I said we need some trees in the median on Telegraph and everybody's like, no, let's don't do that.
I tried.
And we got a grant
Yep.
of several $10,000 and we got trees put out there. I mean, it's
It's
doable.
worth it.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's worth
but
chasing.
this goes back to what I was trying to say, which is that we need to fix the scope of what we're solving. Because then we can think about timing and sources of funding. So the way I think about it is, let's take, for example, the 8.8 million or whatever the number was for selective rehabilitation. The way I'd approach it is that I think of it over, let's say, a 3 to 5 year timeframe. Initially, I wouldn't try to tap the bond markets in this high interest rate environment. I would start initially using the cash that we have put aside together with potentially a infrastructure bank loan, which is over 20 years. The second assumption that I would make is I would not plan this to be 100% repayment at the time of maturity. The reality is we can refinance. The municipal bond market, the municipal capital market is open. We can refinance. So do we need to put aside 100% to repay in 2045 or 2035 or whatever the year is? We don't. So in terms of how much we actually need to raise, we can solve for all these things and we can come up with all these scenarios in terms of what instrument to use and when. And at the same time, I would start planning for some kind of fund that the village runs to be able to build a reserve that is made up of contributions. I know the philanthropic comment might be amusing, but the reality is you can raise funds. I have raised funds, and you're able to source capital over the long term to get to a stage where this is renewable, you don't have to solve this problem every time. And that is one instrument amongst many that you can use, right? But to begin with, we need to know, what are we solving for? Right?
When you say, what are we solving for, you mean,
Whatever the scope of, let's say, the road projects is, to me, that is a combination of what is feasible, what is engineering. That's gonna give us a number. Right, and a period of time on which we wanna implement that project. So figuring out what is that number is then really the first step, to be able to then say, okay, what instruments are we gonna use?
But each proposal could in fact have a different. financing.
Correct, yeah, of course.
Yeah, my son makes presentations to portfolio managers and they refinance all the time. Yeah.
Right.
And it's gonna be going down with time, right? Because we've hit a peak, so that's a good point.
so, but you're not asking for additional information from the council though, right? You're more like, what are we doing?
Well, whether it comes from the council or it comes from this committee, to me, the assumption we've got to fix, or set of assumptions, is what is the actual engineering scope here, right? What are we doing? Are we gonna do selective rehabilitation, or are we gonna stick to one of the options you presented and limit the scope, or whatever it may be?
And that will direct all the other activities. I think that's something we need to hear, you know? So in terms of reducing the total debt burden, Ken has been working on the Timber Trail issue. What do we know?
Yeah, sure. So in your packet, there's a memo. I've talked with several entities that would have input on Timber Trail if it were to be converted to a non-motorized 10-foot wide asphalt path as per the estimates. The Franklin Police Department has no objections to this happening. The fire department has no objections. There are no fire hydrants along that stretch. There is, in the estimates, there is an inclusion for bollards, those posts that don't prevent people from driving on things. There's ways for those to be locked and collapsible if you unlock them, so that trucks, if necessary, could get in there, into that area. So that was one of the chief's concerns. As long as we can have keys to those bollards, no problem. If we have to drive back there for some sort of an emergency, like a fire. Anything else? We wanted to know whether or not that surface would accommodate a 21-ton fire truck. And according to the engineer, it should be fine. DTE, I spoke with DTE. There are utility poles and overhead lines along Timber Trail. And again, with the bollards, as long as they could get in there when necessary to do any sort of maintenance work, that's acceptable to them.
Explain what a ballard is again.
The bollard is like, they oftentimes are yellow. They're just like a yellow pole that prevent you from driving into a driveway that might be for an abandoned building or a closed up building that might be blocked off.
So these would be set up at both ends of Timber Trail?
You would have like maybe 3 or 4 across the entrance so that a car couldn't drive into the area.
Because it'd be above there. Yeah.
Or just have a sign that says not a through street?
Well,
You want to keep vehicles out.
what I can do I can take a few pictures of bollards
Okay.
or find them online and just shoot you guys.
So I have a pretty good idea.
Yeah, and there's a way to lock them. And unlock them and push them, or have them just basically fall down so that you could drive over them to get into an area if necessary. Let me just make a note about the bollard photo.
How do you spell it?
BOLLARD.
The state uses them on the rails to trails, if you ever seen.
Mhm.
rails to
Yeah,
trails.
that's right, yeah.
The state will use them to separate a through road to the path, so that no motorized vehicles can go down the path. And
But it's
again, they
easy to
are
model.
unlockable,
Mhm.
unlockable.
Another creative way to keep people from driving on things is to set boulders up. You know, just, so it's, maybe that might be even nicer, that you have a couple of boulders than some bollards, not all bollards, because it kind of looks industrial. We'll get there when we get there. Oakland County Water Resource Commissioner's Office, I have contacted them as well. I haven't gotten an official answer from them yet, but there is sewer main and water main that runs underneath Timber Trail. They didn't seem to have an issue at all, and I talked with Brad, and he suggested that they would probably have no concerns or objections. Because there are some manholes, and if they had to get back there again with the removable bollards or collapsible bollards, they could. And finally, I talked with the village attorney, just to make sure that we could do this. And that is close Timber Trail down to a walking path, and the answer is yes, we certainly can. So this is again, you know, I'm not advocating necessarily, but I'm telling you that there's an option. This is something that could be done. There are rail to trail grant monies out there for things of this nature. It's not an old rail line, but it's the same concept. And you know, non-motorized transportation encouragement is something that is high in the minds of a lot of public officials. So this is a project that I think would certainly be grantable
Good.
when the time comes.
And what is the financial impact on the proposal to resurface it?
That's a dollar.
Oh, did you find one?
Great.
Oh, there you go.
Retractable power.
Those are stainless though.
Those are fancy ones.
They come in different. Here's another one.
There's
Yeah,
Perfect.
they don't have to be yellow.
Well, for
So the fire trucks will
visual
get through.
effect, yeah.
Right, so there are three estimates in the original Timber Trail.
Yeah, I could also point out that part of 14 Mile Road between Livernois and, is it Livernois or? Well, from Franklin Road on
Inkster.
Inkster, thank you, is all dirt.
Oh, yes, I think you mentioned that before, yeah.
It's already a trail.
Well, Timber Trail is almost dirt too.
Yeah. But I think once or twice a year, a grader goes through and that's it.
So the three estimates, the most expensive is a rehab of Timber Trail with drainage improvements and whatnot, and that's at $919,000. The middle cost investment, estimate is still making it into maintaining it as a road at $600,000. And then the conversion to a trail is $325,000. So there's quite a big difference. But I will say this, that even in the front page, as far as the estimates go, the most expensive one is not even included. It's just, the HRC only has the two lesser of the 600,000 and the 325,000. Again, I think that this is a project that could be grantable. The political issue you would have would be that there are people that are really used to having that as an outlet. And they might have concerns about that. Yes, sir.
Just with regards to that, Councilmember Howard forwarded to DE and I some correspondence from a local resident. I don't particularly want to give his name because I don't have permission to, but he wrote her saying, please help us enforce the no truck status of the Timber Trail Road. We feel really sad the city has to pay for so much road repairs caused by the road abuse from the trucks. Most of the truck traffic is brought to Timber Trail by Google Maps, some by Apple Maps. Theme City could claim Timber Trail to be private. So in other words, there's a resident who is not really happy with it being Timber Trail being as used as it is. He then sent a second email saying, The original Timber Trail was one lane, almost no base. And, suggested that in his opinion, the best option would be the trail, not the redoing of the road. Now that's only one person, but it sort of goes towards, maybe there isn't as much opposition to it, and certainly from a cost standpoint, it would save at least $250,000.
Well, the bollards to keep the trucks off.
They would.
Well, if it was converted to a trail, the idea is that no trucks would drive, or any vehicles. of any
No,
kind.
nothing would drive on it, right? It was a
But they won't
trail.
know until we put the bollards up. Right.
I would think neighbors would favor it.
Well, I would tend to agree with that, but I've gotten a few calls
Okay.
saying, asking if this is going to happen, and I said, it's way down the road, I can't, no pun intended. But I can't say for certain, there would be plenty of opportunity for public comment, there'll be meetings that'll be occurring.
Notice there's one driveway access.
But the folks that live on all the way maps over here, at Hickory Hollow and
Yes.
sort of the far reaches of Old Orchard Trail. They like the idea of having two outlets in the event that a tree falls down or there's some sort of other emergency. And I can't blame them for liking that, right? But on the other hand, there's a lot of cul-de-sacs in the village already.
I don't
So they would be
know.
joining the club in a sense.
Right, yeah.
Here's a point, if the ballards are collapsible, then in case of
Oh,
emergency,
yeah.
it's
That's
opened
We
up
can
to
do that.
Solution.
Certainly.
local traffic.
That
Certainly.
addresses that.
Sure.
Well, just let me ask this, just because, as Mr. Scotty said, we have to define the scope. I mean, like, could we define the scope with regards to this one issue tonight? I mean, could we say does the committee feel like, absent like us getting a bunch of comments from other residents to the contrary, that we would prefer to do this as a trail as opposed to a road? Could we decide that today, or are we not far enough down the road?
Let's make a motion and we'll just put the motion through and pass that on to council. I think that's reasonable, right?
Yeah, but there could be part of the.
Well, I would then move that we for the Timber Trail Road, view it or consider it, consider the path option for future considerations in terms of redoing the roads.
Okay, second, okay, all in favor? It passes?
If it's sometime, if we get like 50 residents who are, banging on the doors and absolutely opposed to that, then we can like change it, but at least for this issue, we've established a scope then.
I think that removable bollards kind of solves a lot of those
Really
things,
does.
yeah.
And the police and fire would, I'm assuming, would know how to do that.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
We can put a video on the website. How to collapse them. Okay. I guess we're at the point where we got member comments. So, Kurt, hold it.
If I can.
Joel Lavity, 23060 Saco Court. Today was the final day in Southfield Township of the three villages, Bingham, Beverly, and Franklin, in terms of people appealing their property taxes. I've been the chair of that group for the last 2 decades, and I can tell you, based on Bingham Farms individuals that came in, whether they be in the condos or they live on Bingham Farms, going back to the comment that you made last month, Kurt, in terms of raising the millage without having to go on the ballot, there isn't an appetite for even doing that. And again, talked about 1 mill, 2 mills, 3 mills. Again, having experience over the last couple decades
of individuals, whether they're coming in on poverties, whether they're coming in from the condos, whether this year again, Bingham Road individuals, there isn't an appetite for millage increase. So for what it's worth.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we're gonna go around the table, Kurt.
Sure, I would like to have a couple of things added to the list that Ken was nice enough to prepare in terms of the items that we should maintain a thought pattern on. One, for the February 14 meeting, could we indicate also that HRC indicated that it would cost that the approximately there would be a 4% increase in costs compounded annually?
To the estimate.
Pardon?
To the estimate.
To the estimate, right. And I believe they also said that we could not repave all of the roads in one summer. That, I wonder if we could add that, and then to the 228 meeting, I wonder if we could add that Treasurer Patton presented a sheet showing a breakdown of $2.7 million available for roads at present, and a breakdown of historical, is it Act 51 funds? And road costs. And that's my own comment. Thank you.
Is that doable?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just encourage, again, that we recognize that there is a deadline. And there's not a lot of time left. And each one of these potential proposals is going to take a lot of time. So with that said, all I would say is some people on this committee are retired, some are, I'm not. But I'm glad to volunteer my time, other than every other Wednesday night, to work on scenarios with it. I understand we can't meet all together, but up to 3 of us can meet at any point in time. And I think it's gonna take working, just like Jim is right now, working outside of this committee to get those proposals put together.
Well, we're gonna have essentially subgroups forming based on these 2 proposals that are gonna be presented at the next meeting. And you're gonna get them very soon, so you could actually work with the 2 authors and help. Okay, so it's not like we're waiting for another meeting. There's a lot of information you're gonna get.
Well, I guess the way I feel is that, which is fine, by the way, but what I feel is that there's individuals doing things on a voluntary basis, which I very much appreciate. But, so I could either take the approach that I'm gonna do my own scenario as well and present it next time. Then maybe, I just don't think that's an official way of doing it.
Well, but the thing is, if you get in a little subgroup, you're gonna have disagreements and you're gonna end up with your position anyway. So, you know, let's go with that. Let's see what you can do.
My comment would be, go over again exactly what you would like from council. What I've got is, do we want a particular phaser rating? Do we want a particular road condition, or is there a time involved, or what have you? I guess, because I look at what council has said for us to do is to give them what we think, not necessarily any restrictions and or other than give us 5 ideas.
Well, we've got all the ideas that the engineers can come up with. And I think it boils down to what do the residents want. We can implement it, but what do they want? That's just my opinion on how the hierarchy of ideas come in. And we need help. You know, I might say my particular road, Brittany Court, we just had a collapse of a culvert at the entrance of the street. And that's gonna take a little extra money. Maybe you better pay attention to my road. I think we need just a general overall guidance on what road conditions, and I think that's what we want.
Yeah, I mean, basically the engineer said that this is the official way that the state rates the quality of a road. So this is what they've adopted. So what is our target? Or is our target to be in the 3 to 4 range and the 5 to 7 range and the 8 to 10 range? What is our target?
We can certainly bring that up.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. We need guidance. So we're still going around the table.
Nothing further, just that I'm one member who'd be available on the off Wednesdays if the group needs to have more meetings.
So we
Wednesday
could,
nights
what
are
we've
workable.
learned, my opinion, I'm still working, and when we went through COVID, we couldn't meet together. So we set up these team meetings or Zoom meetings, and it was just like we're in the same room.
Right,
And why not try that?
That's an
I do
option too,
teams
that's right.
all the time. Every day I've got 4 or 5 team meetings.
yes,
Don't have to have official time, everybody to meet, just say this, we're teams, we're gonna fire it off at 7:30, be there, be square, right? So. That's my suggestion. I've just gotten used to virtual
mhm,
or video meetings. So they work really well.
we do.
Okay, well,
Nothing else. That's it.
all set. Okay, my comment is that where do we stand with the speed bump?
I have this. Yevgeny was able to convert and get the study. I have the entire study. We could just email it out to you. I don't know that it really warrants discussion at this point in time as an agenda item.
I know,
Get the study out to you, sure.
I was just wondering, kind of,
It is academic, but it's not like it's exciting reading, but it has some conclusions in it that's worth
okay,
checking out.
everybody want that?
Actually, could you think we could upload it? To the, yeah. Or is,
Our village
it's not, yeah, but we don't own it, that's what I'm saying, that's,
Yeah, that,
Yeah, I'd be more concerned about
Alright.
that,
all right,
Just put a link,
all right,
just put a link to it on.
but we'll just email it to you.
yeah. I'd like other people to see it,
Oh, okay.
if they want it. All right, you know what,
We can always put up the link to the official site where people can pay to see the study.
$39 a piece.
Oh, yeah, but
All right, I'll email it to all of you.
that's good.
If anybody in Zoom land or any of you guys want this speed bump study, I will just email me and I'll get it to you, okay?
Are
Okay,
there areas where they're
Perfect.
being discussed?
what's that?
Are there areas in the village where they're being discussed?
I have a suggestion from a resident that lives on Bingham Road that maybe
Okay.
they could put it
All right,
I just want to tie a little bow around that since the discussion was still open. Okay, nothing for me. You guys have any final words?
to us. I'm sorry, I don't.
On the speed bumps, have you talked to either the police and or fire? Because they would be the guys that it would affect the most.
Well, also the snowplower,
Yes,
He'll take it out. There's
and
no
and
problem.
he's not excited about it. The police have, basically, I shouldn't say the police, the chief doesn't think that they're really worth.
and that
Installing.
was when it was brought up eons ago, that both police and fire said.
I haven't asked the fire chief, but the police chief doesn't think that they're worth installing. He thinks people tend to speed in between the bumps.
And that's why
Yeah.
you have one, two, at least 2 sets of stop signs.
Right, that was brought up.
True.
Were you, yeah, I think, were you on council with that? I think you were.
Yeah, well, I think it was 3 stop signs, right?
Yeah.
If you count the one on the end.
Yep.
Okay,
All right.
all right. Next meeting in 2 weeks, you can have small video meetings if you want to, or real meetings. And another note that I just want to throw in there is that when you do have a meeting, even if it's a video meeting with 2 or 3 members of the committee, just send me an email and tell me who met, because there might be rumors out there that's all this Open Meeting Act violations going on. I just want to snuff them. So I'm not going to judge, just send me an email saying, so-and-so and so-and-so, we had a meeting, we talked about this on a certain day, and that's it.
3 or fewer, right?
3 or 2.
Yeah.
If you have 4 in the meeting, you got trouble. Okay, we're at the point where we need an adjournment. Anybody have a motion?
Move.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.